y'all, it's Katie. Today we are talking about Bad Romance by Heather Demetrios. Bad Romance is a contemporary YA novel dealing with abusive relationships. We follow our main character Grace, who starts dating Gavin, and in a whirlwind relationship they kind of fall in love and become each other's lives really quickly, and then she starts to realize that they've become each other's lives, and everything kind of, in the way that it does with abusive relationships, becomes a lot more than you anticipated. So she's kind of trying to discover who she is and trying to figure out what she should do. I need to walk away, and you kind of follow her figuring out that this is so not okay and that she needs to get out of this, and the struggle because she wants to get out but also she loves this boy and she's so worried about him. Honestly, I've read a lot of YA contemporaries dealing with abuse because those are just something that I like to read. I think they're really important. And I think it's really important that we have a lot of good ones for like teenage girls to be reading so that we know when we're going out into the world what is and isn't okay. A lot of times people don't realize that they're in an abusive relationship until after it's been over. And I think that if we could get more books like this that were accurately written, it would be really good for young women. I have read a lot of this type of book, and I think that Bad Romance is probably my favorite that I've ever read. A big part, I think, of why I feel that this book was so well done for the topic that it was addressing is because the writing wasn't flowery. A lot of times in contemporaries, when we're dealing with really difficult topics, people are speaking and just pouring out their souls in this beautiful, beautiful way. And that is a great way to write. That's a great thing. That's a very, thing that we all like with John Green. It's very flowery, but I think that that's also where we get the kind of idea of oh, their life is so tragic and they're so tragically beautiful. That's such a tragically beautiful story. And I think that with a book like this, sometimes you don't want it to be tragically beautiful. You want to say, hey, this is messed up. And I think that is why a lot of times people think that things are kind of romanticized, is because they are oh, well, it's this beautiful writing and they're kind of coming from this dark but beautiful place. You can see that they're a tortured soul. And with this, we didn't feel oh, Grace is this beautiful tortured soul. She was completely blunt. She just said it how it was. She started off the book by saying, I hate you so much. I think that this is where a lot of these type of blunt writing books from someone to someone who mistreated them appeal to audiences because they're very fresh and honest. They're not hidden behind all of this beautiful writing, which, while lovely, is sometimes not what you need. I think this is kind of a very similar feel to Why We Broke Up, in that way that they're both very just bam, in your face. I'm not trying to be cute. I'm not trying to write a poem. I'm trying to say, hey, you messed me up, and that's not okay. Heather Demetrios actually acknowledges in her author's note that she was in a similar relationship, and that is why she did decide to write this book. That's what she based a lot of the events on, and I think that because she has been there, it made her do a wonderful job of understanding the thoughts of a person in this position. I thought that it was so well done, so real. The back and forth was very honest. I thought that a lot of the dynamics that were included that aren't necessarily involved but do come into play, that don't get mentioned a lot of times in books dealing with abuse and things like that, were really well written. I did end up giving this book a 9.2 out of 10. I needed a book like this to be written like this on this topic because there are a lot of beautiful ones, a lot about dealing with this kind of thing, but I think that this was the best that I've ever read. And I do really hope that this book does pick up some steam because I think that it's something that could be really good for young women. I think it's a book that could do a lot for young women. That is all I have to say for the non-spoilery section of this video. So if you have not read Bad Romance, I suggest you go do it. It was really good. 10 out of 10 would recommend. And if you have read Bad Romance, let's get on with it. I want to talk about this apple stem thing that I just think was such beautiful symmetry. At the beginning, she's twirling this apple stem right after her and Gavin start to date, and it's the thing where you break it off, and whatever letter it breaks off on is the letter of the person you're gonna marry, true love of your life. So it breaks off on G, and she's like, oh my god, Gavin. And then later on, when Gavin's not being good to her and the relationship doesn't seem like it was initially, she realizes, oh my god, maybe the G was for Gideon. But then when we get to the end of the book, after everything has happened and she stepped away and she's like, I don't need Gavin or Gideon right now. I need to be alone, I need to be me, and I need to not let other people affect me. She realizes the G was for Grace all along. I'm getting goosebumps talking about this right now. Beautiful, I think in books like this a lot of times it is love saves them. There's someone else that comes in and pulls them out of this place that they're at or something, and I think that while that is a really nice idea, And sometimes it certainly does happen that way. In this case, it was really important to show you are all you need, and sometimes you need to be by yourself. We have, at the beginning of the story, Gavin has just tried to commit suicide, and they're talking to Summer or whatever, and now that they've broken up, Summer's not worried about him anymore. Now she's upset because she finally got the strength to break up with him after a year together, and he did that, and now everybody's like, oh my god, how dare you, Summer, what's the matter with you? And he's making her feel guilty for something that she needed to do, and she's telling everyone, she's like, hey, like, listen, he was so controlling, he wanted to be my whole life, he didn't want there to be anyone else involved, I was trapped, and everyone's kind of just like, okay, whatever, Summer, and they stop being friends with her, and it's like, just a little thing, and it's just like kind of mentioned, and Grace is just like, oh, whatever, like, I don't understand, why wouldn't you want him to be your whole life? I think that's so true, because normally abusive men are not abusive in one relationship. Like, it is, they are serially offending in this way. There are signs, like, ahead of time that you just don't see, you just don't think, you make up excuses for why that's fine or why that person must be lying, because we're, like, conditioned to assume that the woman is lying, or that she's the crazy ex-girlfriend that just doesn't want to admit whatever it is. Gavin and Grace get together right after he gets out of the hospital. She had wrote him this letter when she found out that he attempted to commit suicide, and then he's like, oh, this letter, like, kept me going, and blah, 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 and then all of a sudden, like, 2 weeks later, they're in love or whatever. He's like, oh, I don't know, my parents don't want me to be in a relationship, but they, like, want to be together anyways, and he's kind of just holding that, and she's just like, I want to be together, why aren't we together? And then eventually he's finally like, okay, and, like, his parents aren't happy about it, but, like, it's fine. Except when we see his parents, they've never really shown any distaste to Grace when they first meet her. Like, they're not like, oh, you're bringing a good girl over. They're like, oh, we're so excited to meet you, and we love Grace, and I mean, like, a part of me kind of wonders if they ever did ask him to wait to have a girlfriend, or if that was just something that he used to kind of get her more attached to him in those beginning stages. Either way, I feel like it worked that way. And he did, right off the bat, understand that, like, home was not a good place for her. Her parents were not involved, and they didn't really care about her. And I think that a lot of times this tends to be the trend. Like, whenever you read books dealing with abusive relationships, either her parents aren't very involved, her parents are also abusive in some way. I think that is definitely something that, like, helps people who want to be able to manipulate someone to find an easier target. Because even when her stepfather did say something about it, say like, hey, listen, this seems like it's going in a bad direction, he wasn't going to do anything about it. Then we have the aspect of her friends, and she kind of starts to hang out with them less. He starts to get kind of like upset. He always kind of wants to be with her when she wants to be with them. And so she kind of starts to talk to and be around her friends less. And I think that in this book, she actually stayed a lot more in touch with her friends than people in a lot of books depicting abusive relationships do. Or like, even when she kept going back and forth, when she did say, okay, I'm going to do it this time, they supported her fully, and they never walked away from her, even though they were frustrated with what she was putting herself through. Honestly, her friends were just such amazing characters. I love the way that they treated her, that they were always saying like, hey, you need to break up with him. Hey, 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 break up with him. Break up, like, constantly. They didn't let up. They didn't say, okay, you're going to do whatever you want. You're an adult. It was, you're an adult, but, like, break up with him. I love that when she did eventually get the courage to write the letter, they took her there. They were like, hey, like, if we're going to support you, we're going to enable you. And then we have his family, who is so kind to Grace, and they're always really open and loving, and they clearly love their son. And then they help him later on. She realizes that they see him as so perfect that they won't stop him when he's doing things wrong. His mother finds her letter saying like, hey, like, you're not good to me. We don't need to be together. She finds it in his pocket when he goes into the hospital after Grace breaks up with him, and she gets mad at Grace and says like, how dare you, blah, blah, blah. You need to come back to him. Trying to manipulate her into staying with him, even though they can tell what's going on from that letter. And I think them being there definitely made it a lot harder for her to break up with him, because he's got this sweet, sweet family, and, like, obviously he seems like a nice guy to everyone else, and how can you let the parents down like that? I think that that's definitely an aspect in real life that can make it a lot more difficult to break up with someone like that, is knowing how their family will react, or all the things that their family have done for you in the past, and feeling like you're indebted to them or to him, and I thought that that was really well depicted. We have him trying to affect her long-term decisions, kind of guilting her into it, with the whole college thing. He got into UCLA, but told her that he didn't, and didn't go because he didn't want to leave her. So then whenever the time came And he said, well, just don't apply to NYU. I mean, I didn't go to UCLA. And she can't say no, because then it's, I love you less than you love me. When she feels like he's so much better than her, that's not an option. And he's guilting her into feeling like if she doesn't do it, then she must not be a good girl. And we repeatedly see him doing this. He doesn't really care about her long-term aspirations, and he wants to keep changing and morphing her long-term goals because he wants them to all be centered around him. And then he starts using sex in completely wrong ways. When they first have sex, she doesn't want to, and he pushes her until she says yes, and from then on it's kind of just expected that whenever he wants it, they're gonna do it. And that's clear throughout all of the book. It's never a thing that she ever questions. Whenever she's not in the mood, it's like, okay, whatever, it doesn't matter. And then of course in the end, he starts to initiate sex while she's sleeping, and then when she wakes up and says no, that doesn't stop anything, and he assaults her. It's definitely something that happens in real life abusive relationships all the time. And people don't feel like that's ever gonna be assault. Like, you can't consider that assault or rape because, hey, he is your boyfriend. But that still counts. It's still rape. And that's definitely something throughout the book that is worrisome when you're seeing them getting into the relationship, that he doesn't really care about her feelings where that's concerned, that she doesn't really have a say, and while at the time she doesn't really think about it. A lot of times in relationships like this, the female does tend to be someone who hasn't really had a long-term serious relationship before, so they don't really notice when things are like off because they don't have anything to compare it to. They don't really think to say like, hey, that's not okay, because they don't know anything different, so they expect that that's just how it's supposed to be. Of course, then towards the end, she finally decides like, hey, I need to break up with him, and we have a while where she wants to, but she just can't because she loves him a lot. She tries to go back and forth, and she'll get up the courage, and then whenever she's with him, she's unable to because it's just completely different. And then we have him manipulating her by threatening to commit suicide, which she knows is not a joke because he's done it before. Grace talks to her friends and is like, hey, like, I can't though. He'll kill himself. I can't do that to him. Like, I love it. I can't be responsible. And the thing is, that is such a real thing. That happens in real life every single day. And like her friends told her, like, it's not your responsibility. That is his choice. If you breaking up with him causes him to make that choice, that's awful. Like, I'm sorry that he feels that way, but he can't manipulate you like that. That's not okay. That is manipulative, and no, it's never gonna be your fault. Just keep thinking about it, and I have more things to rave about because I thought it was such an accurate and honest portrayal. It was so honest. It was so real. Nothing was left out. A lot of times we have this tendency where if physical abuse is not being committed, we don't consider it abuse. We're like, oh, well, is he hitting you? No? Then you're fine. Like, why are you whining? And I thought that this book, because he didn't really hit her, there was no physical abuse until the very, very end, I thought that it was a good portrayal of, hey, that's still abusive. I think that's all that I really have to say about Bad Romance, but like I said, I really do hope that this becomes something that young women are reading a lot more before they're getting into relationships. I think that this is a really great read for anyone who is in a relationship or is a young woman. I think that this is something that we all kind of need to be looking out for as we're going out into the world, because in all honesty, abuse is not rare, and we deserve to have the knowledge to know when things should and shouldn't be the way that they are. So I'm hoping that more young women will be reading this and kind of getting this knowledge behind them so that they can look out for themselves and their friends. A huge thank you to Heather Demetrios for writing this amazing book. I love you for, and I'm glad that you got out of your bad romance, and if any of you are currently in a bad romance, I hope that you find the strength in you to get out of it. So that's all I have for today. Bye, y'all. Have a good one.